All right, I think I am live. And for once, I'm not going to wait around in order to be sure that I am live. I'm just going to assume I am so that there is not this dead space at the beginning of every live stream. Hopefully I will see in the chat in just a moment that this is working out right. I imagine there will be a fan noise. God damn it. This time I just went to some trouble in order to place my computer on top of an ice pack in order to avoid any of that happening, and it seems to have worked not even a little bit. So hello everyone. Hello beautiful people. Thank you for joining me for this live stream. I'll be talking about some ideas of mine, and then I will go into an Ask Me Anything stream. I hope that all of you, like me, are enjoying your apple juice. Delicious. Yes. Well, what do I have to cover tonight? I have a number of things. Let me figure out how to start this. Oh, yes. Please do support this channel by subscribing to Semiagog, also to A Safer Space here on YouTube and on BitChute. There is also Minds. There is Gab. There is, dare I say it, Parler, whatever the hell is going on with that. There is Twitter, where I am active. And for those who wish to support the channel, there is GoFundMe and Subscribestar. For those who do support the channel in that fashion, I thank you very much indeed. All of the credit and none of the blame. And given that Tim is not here, I will on his behalf say, send folding money. So, where do we start? There are still some people rolling in. I will try to look at the chat while I am doing this, but as you guys know, I'm rather challenged with that. So as people roll in, I will do my shilling, which, contrary to what everyone imagines, is not for Israel. It is in fact for my books. I still have not gotten my damn copies. I have not gotten them. I still have only these damn not for resale copies, but here they are. Other people have received these damn things, and I haven't yet. This is a sci-fi book. It's called Vinculum, a dystopian cyberpunkish tale set in an ugly future. It is designed as entertainment. This book is available through Amazon. You can find it by searching for my name, Oliver Perrin, down here. Yeah, so please check it out. It's available in paperback as well as in a Kindle format. And then there are my poems, which are now available. Again, for this one, I do not have a damn final copy, which is just infuriating, but you can find it. You will have to search for my full name, however, which is Oliver Timken Perrin. You can find that on Amazon as well. It's called Cinders from the Bloomery of Youth and the Church of State. What else do I have to cover? Sometimes apple juice just tastes so goddamn good. Let me look at the chat here before I go to what else I have to cover. The Green Knight is drinking fine wines and ales. All right. Hey, mix your liquor. I try not to have the light and dark go together, but yeah, whatever works for you, man. Hello to Zed Des. Very happy to have a moderator in the house. Thank you for dropping in. I see Nick is here. Did you pay full price for those books? Nick. There is the guy from Vermont. Faith Oglesby. Hello, Miss Lady. Happy to see everyone here. So what am I going to talk about? First, I'm going to talk about the next book that is coming up after these ones that I just spoke about. And that is going to be a translation of a book on tribal marks from the Caucasus. There is a book written by a Circassian who was a Mamluk bondsman in the service of a man named Ali Sherif Pasha in Egypt in the middle of the 1800s. He was a bondsman, basically their version of a slave, but you know, the Mamluks, warrior slaves, that tradition stuck around for quite some time. By this point, he wasn't riding around in plate mail under baibars. fighting Mamluks. He was, excuse me, fighting Mongols. He was this latter-day Mamluk, which meant he was sort of a gentleman in the service of this this Sherif, this Pasha, this Ali Sherif Pasha. He got sent to the Caucasus from Egypt. Now, he's originally from the Caucasus, but he probably sold himself into slavery after a fashion. It's hard to get a clear picture of exactly how that system works. It wasn't quite like what we imagine slavery to be like today, retrospectively, looking backwards. But he sold himself into service in Egypt, so he left the Caucasus. He was a Circassian, a Bzeduch, and he went down to Egypt. And Ali Sherif Pasha was famous as a collector of horses. And he had a very, very famous stud with some of the finest breeds of horses known in his day. It was later bought, his horses were later bought by Wilfred and Emily Blount, and they formed the Blount stud, which became a major sort of the point to which any number of really important horse bloodlines trace back their origins, because the Blounts, when they went to the Middle East, rescued these horse breeds that otherwise would likely have disappeared. So anyway, his master was way into horses, and he sent his Circassian Mamluk servant back to the Caucasus in order to do research there, and it appears that he was researching the clan marks and signs of these Circassian tribes and others. And I found out about this book when I was living in Istanbul. It's, what is it? Kafkasya kabilelerinin alamat ve umaralarının bazı hikayat ve vakaları. I studied Arabic in high school, so I sort of know the alphabet, and I learned Turkish when I was in Turkey to some extent. So I'm having to read Turkish, and it's from the 1800s, Ottoman Turkish, but it's written in an Arabic alphabet. And the thing that makes it even more dodgy is that it's written by a Circassian for whom that Ottoman Turkish was not his first language. And what I have to translate looks like this. So I've been working on this for about 10 years now, on and off. It's not that much. It's a rather small book. This is a copy of the entire manuscript. But it's going to be very, very interesting indeed when I am done. So I'm going to finish that next, and I'm probably 70% through the translation process, so it's going to be, I don't know, another 5 or 6 months. I'll be working on that, and then, you know, I'll start typesetting it, and actually what I'll have to do is send it out to a specialist in Ottoman who can check my translation, and then, pardon me, I will have to send it to a specialist in Circassian languages, and hopefully this academic that I've been told about, who's Bzeduch himself, who can you know, look at some of the aspects about that culture that I'm not aware of, not hailing from that place. But it's fascinating. There are all these stories about these tribesmen. They disappeared in the 1860s with their defeat by Russia, but they really, the traditions they had about the marks and signs that they put on their weapons, that they put on standing stones, that they carved into guest doors in the homes that they, the doors to guest rooms in the homes that they stayed in, the markings on the pommel of their saddle. These traditions were unbroken, you know, some variations likely, but unbroken traditions of how they used marks and signs to organize themselves, their territory, their possessions, organize themselves socially. This goes back at least 2,000 years to the Sarmatians, very likely as far back as the Scythians, because across the steppes these same systems were used. So when I finally get done with it, it will be interesting indeed, and I will, you know, at long last be finished with this work of translating Ottoman, which I wasn't cut out for. I just ended up having to do it myself because I couldn't find anyone to do it for me. It raises issues even for people who are good with Ottoman, because it's written by someone who didn't speak Ottoman well. It's really kind of infuriating. Yes, the Circassians, Waterpenny, yes, they branded their horses as well, which is why this guy went up into the mountains to collect the brand signs that are also the clan signs, that are also the territorial signs. So there's some passages in this book where it mentions that such and such a family breeds great horses that make good swimmers. Or, you know, horses that are known for being beautiful with long legs. likewise, there are under, these marks and signs, they'll have a little story about families that are known for having beautiful women. So it's very interesting to see how different things about these non-literate groups. I mean, some of them knew Arabic and they could read, but the culture in and of itself was not literate as we think of it. Instead, they organized things with their marks, their signs, their oral stories, and their songs. But it's not the same thing as being without writing. They had a kind of writing, but it was more mnemonic than phonetic, if you will. And that's another thing that comes out of this. But yeah, they paid attention to, they tell stories about a guy who took 20 bullet wounds from the Russians and still survived. They talk about a guy who was murdered and thrown into an icy mountain stream and found a year later when the snow melted again and his body was untouched. They talk about witches that are, bound to stakes and burned in the middle of the village. There are all kinds of wild-ass stories from this period. And for those who don't know, with the Caucasus, there were people who came down as late as the 1920s wearing chainmail, saying that they had heard that the Tsar was under threat. The Tsar, of course, at this point was long dead, and that they'd come down to rescue him. And they're wearing chainmail and carrying swords. So these people were, you couldn't see them from the road. That one goes out to Nick. Mr. Ixme is in the house. We have another moderator. Excellent, and I am glad to see you. Okay. So when that book is done, then I will be moving to one that is on marks and signs, and I am thinking of it as being towards a semiotics or a semiology of nationalism. I have some ideas about how what I have learned about marks and signs should be applied to, let us call it, for want of a better term, the nationalist movement. Many of you, most of you, if not all of you, have seen the ways in which language and scrabble-babble linguistic games are turned to the purpose of manipulation. And a lot of people have cottoned on to the way in which you have to tune your phrases dialectically and deploy them as groups in order to saturate, whatever medium you're in with that term, with that terminology, in order to sort of force the discussion into the framework that you want it to have. And that's important. If it wasn't important, the commies would not be all over it and, swarming behind boards and bureaus, bar and bench, doing their number. They wouldn't focus so much on words and language in that way. So that's an important area. We need to address it. The leftists are already addressing it. Much of what there is to know about that, you can go and check the, Marcuse and the Frankfurt School, or, one commie or another can reveal to you, the best practices that exist in that realm, because that's the realm they understand. They come out of academic training. They're used to things like pilpul and gematria, or, standard academic training. All of these religions of the book, because I'm not, I don't want to focus exclusively on Jews in this respect. Certainly Christians have the tradition, Muslims do as well. So when you get into textual interpretation, or you get into propaganda and the way in which language can be used to further your ends, I guess what I'm saying is that's an area that the opponents are already very, very well aware of. So if you want to learn about it, as I said, you go to them, because they will show you what the best practices. They will show you what the best practices are in that domain. But I see a huge opportunity, because I've identified another place, another area, another way in which human beings organize themselves. And unlike language, with all its anthropocentric pretensions, the area that I have identified amounts to a continuum going back through all these biological strata, back through time, and back down through the various branches of the biological trees. What I'm trying to say is that there is a kind of writing. It is not writing proper. It is not phonetic writing. It's not even logograms. It is a kind of writing that is sub-linguistic. It's non-linguistic. It has no necessary relation to spoken language. And I would go further and say that it's a kind of writing that is much deeper. And the way in which we use it to organize ourselves runs beneath word-based reasoning. Now, basically what I'm trying to say here is that I have found a way that human beings organize themselves. I have blown the dust off of a way that human beings organize themselves that they have in common with much of the animal life on this earth. If you're willing, for example, to substitute a scent mark for a visible mark, then you're in the realm of chemical communication. And a scent mark, rather than a visual mark, still fixes orientation in space. And so you can see that the earth itself is the page, what I call the bleached white plane of page. The primal writing surface is the earth, and these marks are resource marks, territorial marks, environmental marks, and they are the ways that we organize ourselves socially. If anybody wants to find out more about this, there are a number of clips in my playlist on mark studies, I believe it's called. So anyway, that's the next book that I'm going to be working on, but I'm going to be taking this odd insight about how we organize ourselves using animal marks and signs and other aspects of this insight. For example, the fact that I believe that form of writing, as I have qualified it, predates spoken language and therefore is more powerful and deeper still. I'm going to take these insights and try to lay out how they can be applied to furthering the nationalist cause. And there are some reasons why I think this is going to be a very interesting undertaking. And I'm going to lay some few of them out here. Get this set up here before I get started. Let me look at the chat here and see where we are. Is there anything here that is jumping out? Striking. We might as well all wear barcodes. Yes. Okay. So let's try to cover some of how I believe this will be applied, this towards a semiology of nationalism. Well, the first thing that I should lay out, I think, is I was just listening to a live stream that Laura Towler did, and she had some of the guys from the Absolute State of Britain on, and one of them mentioned something about, you know, the how shall I put this? He mentioned something about how this tribalism, this recognition of different racial and ethnic groups, how it's instinctive. And it was just, you know, it was kind of an offhand, you know, remark. It makes perfect sense, right? People instinctively or instinctually distinguish these categories, and they form in-group and out-group boundaries based upon them, right? Instinct, it makes perfect sense. But instinct, it occurred to me when I heard that, I mean, it fits with what I've been thinking about before, but there was something in the way he said it that just kind of struck me, and I realized, wow, this really is a war on instinct. It's an attempt to suppress instinct. And it's really about penalizing the operation of instinct, this whole utopian project. You know, utopian projects seem in and of themselves to be all about the reformation of man. To steal a phrase from Derrida, you know, the utopian project is always already a project about thwarting instinct, about repurposing it, about suppressing or retarding it. This is something that is very, very interesting indeed to me, and it underscores why so much energy, you know, whether it's, you know, in the West at the time, or, you know, with people like Skinner, or off in Europe, or as far away as Russia, there was so much research on things like conditioning, you know, conditioned response, unconditioned response, shit like Pavlov's dog. How can we remake these instincts? How can we reshape them and make our perfect society? How can we socially engineer people? And the whole discourse about this takes place in the domain of the written word. So anyway, the point is, before I get into this stuff about writing, to set the stage for it, is that this helped me, this remark by the Absolute State of Britain guy, helped me because I understood that it's all about a war against instinct. They think that it can be overcome. It's a very, very strange thing, whereas most of you know the old style religions are all about a sort of, they're about the idea that this is not the place where one overcomes instinct, perhaps in the heavenly beyond, right? If you've made it onto Santa's list of who's been naughty, of who's been nice rather than who's been naughty, perhaps in the other world, perhaps in the heavenly Jerusalem, there's some eschatological framework, and at some point we will overcome instinct, but it will not be in this world. And there's this recognition, whether it's the idea of original sin or the idea that there's a shaitan or a iblis or a Satan, that there's always going to be some aspect of the human condition that cannot be overcome. And that's what these people have dispensed with their new religion. And so I think it's very, very important to understand these most primal, these most primitive ways that we organize ourselves. And I think these non-linguistic marks and signs that animals used to orient in space, that we too use to orient in space, are the key to it. So the war on instinct is fundamentally a war upon hierarchy and territory, because these things are fundamental, they're biological. We see them across not just species, but whole domains. I can't remember what I want to say phylum or whatever. I'll get it all screwed up in terms of the biological distinctions, but what I mean is that you'll have them in entirely different orders. So you can see chemical communication and hierarchy, but certainly territorial concerns in the insect realm. You can see it with reptiles. You can see it with mammals. So hierarchy and territory, these things that go back so deep, that are so deeply rooted in biology itself and the manifestation of life forms across our planet, these are the very things that those who wish to remake mankind in their war against instinct, these are the things that they not only hope but expect inevitably to overcome. So a war on instinct, as I said, is fundamentally a war on hierarchy and territory. So the utopian project is therefore one at war with our animal inheritance, or at best they aim to actively subvert our animal inheritance with our systems of organization. And reorganizing man is one of the ways that they hope to reorganize the world. And likewise, inside out, reorganizing the world is one of the ways that they want to reorganize man. And I think that if nationalists can understand this other, deeper, older biological inheritance, this form of writing to which I refer, which is not linguistic, which is like territorial marks. There's a vertical dimension, and there are, the cardinal directions. This is how we, it's like, imagine the three axes of X, Y, and Z to describe three-dimensional space. These, and when you add the fact that a mark can be overwritten or a scent mark can fade, then you add a fourth dimension. These are the marks that we write on the most primal page with, which is the Earth's surface itself. And I believe that if nationalists will pay attention to this, that this is a whole new domain of ground that has not been tilled in quite some time. And I looked carefully. Other than one article by a guy in the 70s, Carlos Ginzburg, who touched on some of it, people have not been fully conscious of this reality, other than, people have got into some strange forms of mysticism, and maybe hunters as a distinct category because they have to read animal signs, scat, traces, rubs, wallows, tracks. Other than those folks, people haven't touched this really since the primordial period of Chinese history, where they have their legend that writing itself was created by the primordial sage Fu Xi, or else Kang Jie, the one with his 4 eyes on his face. So it's been a long time since we've been aware of this. We've been blinded by the emergence of written language. We're not aware of this thing that underpins it. It's much deeper and older. And as I said, because it's a form of organization in 3 or 4 dimensions that we use to regulate our behavior, and yet it's non-linguistic, it therefore operates sub-rationally. And if we understand it, it has all sorts of interesting implications for reconstructing our history, because now the literal definition of something that is prehistorical is a thing that we don't have written accounts to corroborate and understand. So writing itself is what marks the threshold between history and prehistory. But if I can find a form of writing, a form, not writing proper, but a form of writing nevertheless with its own rules, its own ways of being understood, then I cannot, for example, extend history. But theoretically, I should be able to illuminate a kind of sub-history. And so if you look at it temporally, it's almost as though you can imagine that it's more like consciousness and subconsciousness than it is like, or it's as though you have to overlay the idea of conscious and subconscious over the model of historical, prehistorical, and it yields a new category, which is subhistorical. Because we cannot read it the same way that we can words. Nevertheless, it has a grammar, and it was used in space to organize behavior, and in time, across time, to organize behavior. And so I think there are enormous opportunities here that would put the lateral thinking, scrabble, babble, gematria bitches of the Frankfurt School to shame. The problem is that most people don't follow what I'm talking about. But I will not allow that to dissuade me, and I will continue with it. So let's take a look at some of how I would approach this. These are just to tell you honestly, these are just some of my really preliminary notes. I've got a whole bunch of stuff published about all these things that I just talked about, but these are my new notes that I'm putting together because I've spent some years allowing all of that to digest in my awareness, and now I'm coming back at it to see how it can be applied usefully. Right? People out there in the world, they're like, oh, that's fine, and well, you understand something better, but can you show me a good predictive value for it? Well, if it doesn't have predictive value, then how can I fucking test it? I'm not interested, right? So there's a lot of work I need to do to take this from the theoretical, hypothetical realm and use it as a tool with predictive value, and thereby apply it to, you know, how human behavior is shaped and the rest. So these are some of my preliminary notes. Let's see here, dialectical manipulation, which is preeminently linguistic manipulation, entails systematic polar shifts in meaning. Look at the way the term racist has undergone so many transformations. Any number of, you know, other terms like that that have been subject to the tender mercies of the forces of progress, and these terms are twisted and distorted out of all comprehension. It's something that I've touched upon in the past with the old Chinese idea of the rectification of names, that a sage must come along and return the original meaning to these words. And I think that we are definitely going to be seeing a phase of a period of rectification of names. There will be a great renaming, because all of these words have been so distorted, so poisoned, so twisted, that someone is going to have to come along and reconnect the signifier and the signified. And that's going to be something. That is going to be something. And I do not think it is very far away. There's going to be a great shift in the meanings we assign to various words. And I think there's going to be far less patience on the part of most people for the kind of games, the Scrabble Babble games that have been played. So this business of the dialectical manipulation, which is preeminently linguistic manipulation that entails systematic polar shifts in meaning, well, this amounts to moving true north around. See, there are ways in which I can take the idea of the animal orientation being the most primal form of writing, right? Because based on my perspective, we learned to write from animals. And we learned to write from animals before we learned to speak. Now, we could communicate audibly, but I'm saying prior to speech. Because when I say a word like blue, it's already gone. It already fell out of the air. It's disappeared. It's not lasting enough if you imagine a time before any language was shared by anyone. There's nothing to grab and hold and show and provide as a model. But if you have a token, what does a spoon symbolize, right? I can hold this up and it will stay steady in a person's awareness, and we can talk about it and gesticulate towards it or take physical postures towards it that will convey meaning. But a word, it's gone out of the air as soon as it's uttered. And so there are ways in which we can take that knowledge that I'm talking about and carry it forward as the most primal form of writing to the linguistic writing that we enjoy today. And that's what I mean by saying that when they change these word meanings around, where they put us into a situation where we require a rectification of names, what they're really doing is moving around true north. They're creating a situation in which we cannot trust our environmental signs, and so we become disoriented. So it amounts to moving true north around, whenever and however it suits those in the usurpation business. Now, by redefining, reestablishing our signification on a non-arbitrary biological foundation, read hierarchy, read territory, by curb stomping the anthropocentrism that is so fashionable. It's all human. It's all nurture. It's all, it's a priori all you have is a tabula rasa, so we can make of it what we will, right? No, it's biologically encoded. It's hardwired. The same way that the patrolling behavior of dogs is hardwired. When we reconnect with the hierarchical and territorial concerns that I was just talking about, that are shared by most forms of animal life, we reconnect. We can combat the disorientation that our culture is spiraling downwards within. Hopefully this is making some sense to you people. I don't get an A for effort tonight, but I am trying. So, when space is recognized as the writing surface, we restore the value of orientation, which is to say the value of navigation. We establish biological context, the value of territory and resources, even in the semiotic realm. So I want to end the progressive attacks on symbols in the commons. But what's of value is how. So you have to think of this project that I'm proposing as like putting a pin into a map, creating an actual fixed position in space as a kind of stake through the heart of arbitrariness. That's what's most important here, is that with the linguistic theory, and much of the linguistic theory got carried over to semiotics for reasons I don't have time to go into here, but it's all premised on the notion that it's arbitrary. The commies who specialize in the war of words and their manipulation of letters and their manipulation of signification, they all believe in their heart of hearts that it's all arbitrary. I mean, if somebody who's Turkish says "ağaç" for a tree, if someone who's Latin back in the day in ancient Rome said "arbor" for tree, if I say in English "tree," obviously all three of those languages are using that word to refer to a tree. The tree remains the same, that which is signified. But the signifier of these three different words, it's arbitrary. Pick any word. I could say that Peter means tree, right? It doesn't matter. It's all arbitrary. You can make and remake it. You can reshape it. Well, yes, at the level of spoken language and written language, there is a degree of arbitrariness. Now the linguisticians, they recognize that there are some things that are not entirely arbitrary. So if, someone says that a motorboat goes ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba, or if someone says cats go meow, right? Those sounds have a resemblance. They're not entirely arbitrary. They're somewhat motivated. But for the most part, that entire domain of words and language, they view it as being utterly arbitrary, and therefore they feel entirely at ease stepping into it and fucking with it. Like, but look, instead of saying black people, they say youths, right? That creates disorientation because what it conjures in the mind is an image of youths, or they'll say brutes, or any number of other words so they don't have to say black. And we've seen endless examples of this kind of game playing, again, requiring a rectification of names. But the big point here is that it's all about arbitrariness. And what I hope to do by looking at a more primal kind of writing that predates even spoken language and that is a part of our biological inheritance, is fixing at least some of our communication as non-arbitrary. And there's all kinds of stuff about this. There's a whole world of this type of communication. It's just that the communications theorists haven't dug into it with their dirty commie claws yet, because frankly they weren't smart enough to see it. They really all come out of a kind of post-religious religion of the book, their modern day academia. But a lot of it's not arbitrary. You have to know what direction you're going to move in to go towards the nest or towards a resource or away from a contested border. If someone just turns the street signs around on you, so to speak, there is a survival consequence. So as I said, I want to take care of this leftist progressive attack on symbols in the commons. Again, a fixed position in space is a kind of stake through the heart of arbitrariness. That's what I'm talking about. We can establish a point of orientation again, which means we won't be disoriented. And guess what returns with that? On the plane, the orientation of territory, domain, domain, dominion, right? Domus, a home, something to call our own. Territory, it's not arbitrary. A certain amount of living space is required for any person or peoples to flourish. That goes to territory. Likewise for hierarchy, which we'll be getting to in a bit here because I want to say something briefly about the inversion of hierarchy. Let me get through the rest of these. So, we restore the empirical foundation for our evaluation of signs and their deployment, arming ourselves with a theoretical framework that lays bare precisely why debilitating disorientation is the biological consequence of unreliable environmental marks. It's good to know that one is being lied to. Better still, knowing how one is being lied to. So think about, for example, the idea of false flags. There are certain signs that we, by convention, all agree must be reliable. One of them is, for example, the Red Cross symbol. It's comes out of Geneva. It's a Swiss symbol. It's supposed to show neutrality, and that medical care is going to be rolling in, so you're not supposed to fire on them. To misuse that sign is a war crime, and it is called perfidy. We recognize that that sign must be reliable when it really counts. If you misuse rank, which is critical for the function of the military animal in times of crisis, if you're wearing the wrong insignia, that too carries with it penalties, because it destroys the system. It creates disorientation. You don't know who your officer actually is. These are the kinds of things that enemies use to introduce noise into the signal. Likewise, if we have certain brands, like if I'm shown over and over again on television that BMWs with this little BMW logo on the back, that if I buy that car, all women will want to fuck me, and all men will be in awe of my power and my my taste in selecting a fine German driving machine, the pinnacle of German engineering. Well, we have that hammered into our head over and over and over again. But what if the reality is simply that we have a somewhat better than usual car that has an outrageous set of expenses associated with its maintenance? It doesn't correspond to what we've been told. It's like a false flag. It's arbitrary. They've been replacing They're screwing up our points of orientation because we cannot trust the marks and signs we're presented with that we used for orientation. If I want to be desirable and mate, right, and I believe these television commercials, and I want to have offspring so that my genetic line will continue, then I may well go out there and say, well, hell, what I need is a BMW, and what I need is some Alan Edmond shoes, or, I have to buy one thing or another based on this false reality that surrounds me that I see on these screens that tell me I need a given thing. So it's not just with words where they change the words. There are endless number of other ways in which they do this. And again, if we can reconnect to the biological origins of how we navigate in space, which is a kind of non-linguistic writing, then we can restore the idea that it's not all about arbitrariness. We can again gain a point of orientation. So I'm all over the place. How far am I in now? 46. Ooh, okay. Yeah, at 1 hour I want to stop with this, so I'm going to aim for 10:05 to end my rambling monologue and take questions. We're going to try to finish this. Narratives and archetypes. The most primal archetype of the commons is the marked environment. Likewise, the most primal archetype of any narrative is the track followed by a hunter. This happened, then this. Look to the story of how Hermes the liar stole Apollo's cattle. Well, I can't go into that right now. That's a bit more, and I don't have that many minutes left, and I want to cover this one other aspect, at least one other. I had like several more, but I talked for too long. I want to cover this business about the inversion of merit because it ties to all of this. So I'm going to have to let that hang, ladies and gentlemen. I do apologize. But hopefully the basis of this, I might talk to Frody with Guide to Culture about semiotics and semiology at some point, I believe. There's also a possibility that I may talk about some of this with Henrik over at Red Ice. We shall see. I'm working on this further. Obviously, there are my previous clips about it that you can find on the playlist under Mark Studies. If you want to know more about this whole riff, a lot of you have heard about this before. So anyway, I apologize for going off the rails there, but I want to add this last part. Let me see here. What does this say? Looking for guidance from nature, or at least consciously attempting to not willfully run contrary to features of life evident across millennia and entire genera, has something in it of the old ways, the old attitudes, whereby fundamental wisdom was seen reflected in the book of nature, whether expressed in a bestiary of Christ, in which the behavior of animals like the pelican or the wolf illustrated both virtue and vice, or in alchemical lore that exemplified the universal operation of esoteric processes. Similarly, we can look to nature to understand how ambiguity associated with the conventional, arbitrary, linguistic sign can infect or compromise a whole realm of non-linguistic communication on which we rely for the regulation and integration of our behavior, for the functioning of our societies. And perhaps once this knowledge is restored, we can address any number of social problems which currently afflict us, whether these are the products of active malice or mere ignorance. So that was the little one I wanted to throw in there, and I found time for it. So this last thing before I get to the inversion of merit, let me re-up my apple juice. Shit, condensation. There we go. That's all better now. Yes, indeed. We don't want any alcohol abuse going on here. All right. So this other one is something it's a new thought of mine. I think I'm going to have to do a clip about it entirely, but I want to add this in here because, as I mentioned at the outset, you have these three axes, X, Y, and Z. And so you have the plane, which is the realm of territory, but you have the vertical, which is the realm of hierarchy. And you can also take a look at the idea of the Sacred and Profane by Mircea Eliade, the Romanian scholar of religion. I was happy to see that Survive the Jive is talking about him recently. Tim turned me on to him years ago. And there's the idea of the axis mundi, the center post, or the world tree, the vertical dimension. And that has the idea of, as above, so below, or, the earth between the waters, or it has all kinds of things. But important for us is the idea of hierarchy. Let's not get too carried away with it off in some other realm. Let's just think about it right here and now in the most clear circumstance where we can see it applied, where it's very much missing in our day and age. And that is hierarchy. Now, there is, how do I say this? There's a lot of talk about victimology and victim status. There's a lot of talk about being equitable or equity, right? There's the idea that everyone should be treated the same under the law, and then that got extended to this idea that we must somehow level everyone out, right? Essentially, it amounts to the removal of the vertical dimension. And we require that. And a lot of people have noticed this in the sense of saying that, like, this should be based on merit. This shouldn't be based on, gives me that or whatever it is, right? This should be based on merit. And I mean, JF talks about this all the time, JF Gariapi. The importance of merit and accomplishment, and the way in which having to fight your way into that position ensures that you are fit for it, right? Lots of people have talked about this. This is not new. This part of what I'm talking about is not new. And we've also talked or seen people talk about unqualified people being in certain positions, and that is certainly not anything new. There's all of human history is probably a depressing pageant of people who were unqualified for various positions being put into them. This happens all through history. So that in and of itself is certainly nothing new. So we know that people are pissed off about the idea of equality or equity being taken too far to the point that it levels and flattens and renders mediocre, that it shaves off all the peaks of excellence, that our society should be merit-based and all the rest. People have talked about that. So they say we shouldn't do this victimology thing. It should be based on merit. And merit has survival advantage. Everybody gets that. Or everybody should get it. But I think that there is another dimension of this, that it's well worth everyone taking some time to consider, which is that those who manipulate, those who subvert the various categories of them, as most of you will know, I do not subscribe to the idea that there is only one category of those who subvert. I believe that there are overlapping Venn diagrams. At any rate, it's my view that everyone has sort of generally got it, but they haven't had it crystallize in front of them. So I would like to help them have it crystallize in front of them right now. Merit has been utterly inverted with malice aforethought. It's not that just, they believe in equality and the rest. It's that certain parties has, it seems to me, sheer speculation, you understand, have gone in there intentionally to invert our hierarchies. It's not that they want to erase them. That's how they sell it to the public. It's that they wish to invert them. Now, I don't mean up at the top where having your hands on the steering wheel really matters. There, the actual bloody game of power is, being played in all its crimson glory, right? But for the vast masses of people, even those who fancy themselves in charge of things, the kind of people who run universities or run international banks or the CEOs of big corporations, there we see time and again that idiots have been put in charge. Now, as I said, this is nothing new in terms of, idiots who are unqualified coming into positions of power. That's as old as the story of mankind, as I said before. But what is different is an active effort across the board to destroy culture, or if you want to be less charitable, society, by putting people into place who are absolutely unqualified, who are guaranteed to fucking destroy everything with their idiocy. Look at someone like, for example, the CEO of YouTube. That's not just a simple matter of like, something just sort of happened. That person was put where that person is. And there's quite a bit of it going on. And to me, I think the most important thing to take away is it's not just about them trying to level everything. It's not just them trying to remove hierarchy. I think it's very important that we recognize that it's much worse than that. It's specifically about inverting it, turning it upside down, and thereby wreaking havoc with everything about our lives, both individually and socially, collectively, that depends upon hierarchy. If they were just leveling it, it would be one thing, but it wouldn't have the same kind of damaging effects, I think. Right? I have to think that through. Maybe it could. But the important point is that the negative effects concomitant with a leveling of everything should, I think, be considered separately from those that come with an actual, intentional inversion of hierarchy with malice aforethought. So these are my thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. We're rolling up now on 1 hour. I guess we're a little bit under it. We're like 50 minutes now of the first half of this. Let me see if there's anything else I missed. Then I will check the comments and move on to Ask Me Anything. Oh, I know what I wanted to talk. There's one other thing I wanted to talk about. Okay. We'll see how this shows up on the camera. So people send things to my post office box at times. And I got this recently, and I just want to tell all of you that I'm very, very upset by this. I want to disavow this artwork. This came to me in my post office box. It is so... Frankly, it's deplorable, and I utterly disavow it. I just want to show it to you so that you can see what kind of evil exists on Earth, what kind of hatred and bigotry exists on Earth. This beautiful piece of artwork was sent to me. This was produced by John Goris. I can't tell you how much it upsets me. I can't tell you how evil it is in every respect. It makes me very unhappy to have gotten it. It makes me sad to have to show it to you because I think it's beneath all of us to appreciate and enjoy something that looks like that. And you should check out John Goris's YouTube channel. I mean, only to go there and tell them how much you don't appreciate what he did there, which was frankly insensitive. And his channel is John Goris, or you can just do a search for Ghost Tank. So check his stuff out. That's a shout out to him because he sent that to me. I was very upset to get it. Disavow. So yeah, I think we are through the first part, which means we can move to Ask Me Anything. Let me look here at the chat. What you ladies and gentlemen should do is, as I've said in the past, please do put the little @Semiagog before whatever it is that you write that you want me to see so that I will notice it as the chat goes whirling by. So yeah, ask me questions and I will answer them as best I can. Now I think we've got like a 10-second delay here, so I'm just going to sip my apple juice and watch this chat go by. John Goris says, "I'm so sorry, I clearly crossed lines." Mea culpa, yeah, maxima culpa. I mean, I'm not laughing. This is a very serious matter. Questions. So what do we have here? From Boomer21. Hello, sir. Glad to see you in here. I think this is Globalist Agenda 21 being executed, and it will be up and running by 2021. Opinion. I'm sorry to say I don't know anything about Globalist Agenda 21. If I did, I would be happy to give you an answer, but I am afraid I do not. I'm sorry to say that. I wish I could answer your question. All right, what's next? Haviland says, Semiagog, please tell a short story about those warrior slaves. That would be the Mamluk. Well, here's a short story. It was the guy I mentioned before, Baybars. I can't remember the name of the battle, and I'm ashamed because I should. Manzikert. In the 13th century, the Mongols had basically ruled over everything in sight, kicking ass and taking names. They smashed everyone. Everyone. I mean, they had, at one point, in one area of Eastern Europe, they got hit pretty hard and had some trouble, but not that much. Basically, though, they had just rolled over everything in sight without any kind of trouble, and we kicked everybody's asses. I mean, even the famous Hashishin, the assassins of Alamut, couldn't stand before them for very long, and they had their fortresses reduced entirely. But the Mongols decided that they were going to head down through the Middle East, and the Mamluks, who are basically warrior slaves from the Caucasus. So these are people, even though they're in Egypt and in that area, they're people who were born and reared up in the area where, for example, Khabib Nurmagomedov comes from. And these people became warrior slaves and enjoyed considerable status as such. And they basically, those people formed the core of an army that was raised in order to fight the Mongols. And in Manzikert, I believe it was Manzikert, 13th century, must be remembering correctly, under Baibars, their leader at the time, they knocked the shit out of the Mongols. So there's a story about the Mamluks. I mean, there are all kinds of, there's a famous story about when they were surrounded and late in their days in the 1800s and slaughtered their leaders, and one of them leapt from the walls of the Cairo citadel on his horse, falling through the air something like 50, 70 feet, and was said to have smashed his horse beneath him. But the horse died, but he stumbled away, and he was the only one who survived. And as it happens, he's mentioned in this book, in Ottoman Turkish that I'm translating. And no one has ever known what tribe he came from and what his name was. Well, some names were given by Italians in the period and stuff, Europeans, but a different name is given here, and his tribe was given. When I translate the book, hopefully it will be apparent. Okay, so that was a story about Mamluks. Let me get back to these other questions. Spoonie G, segregated prisons, why not? Yeah, prisons are very interesting to me. When everybody talks about how we're going to be brought together in our, beautiful utopian multicultural society in the sky, I think to myself, well, what part of human life is the one where we have the most absolute control over human beings and what they do? Now, mind you, it's not truly absolute. It just isn't. But it's the closest thing to absolute control in the sense that a lot of these social engineers like to think about it. Clocks and locks. You tell people when they can wake up, when they go to sleep, what they do. You can put them in a segregated housing unit, all these different things that you have control over. You can put them to work, turning big rocks into little rocks with sledgehammers. There's chain gangs, all kinds of things you can do with them. This is where we have seemingly the most control over human beings, and they're forced to integrate. And yet, that's where we see racial and ethnic divisions get the sharpest point on it, where that becomes sort of overwhelmingly important in that environment for many. So yeah, segregated prisons. I've been trying to force those people together and make them live together with guards around them at all times, with absolute supervision at all times. And you know what? It doesn't fucking work. And yet, everyone is going to tell us time and again that somehow multiculturalism would just, it can be made to work. Right. So yeah, segregated prisons. I don't know. Sounds reasonable to me. What do we have next? Maitre Mark is in the house. The swordsman. Everyone should go check out Maitre Mark's channel. He's a fine swordsman. He rolls his own cigarettes and he drives around in a strange orangish red truck with a bunch of cigarette butts on the dashboard. He's my kind of guy. He defends his kingdom boldly and without fear of outsiders. So check him out. He's down his country. I mean, he's surrounded by Tasmania, but he has a territory of his own. Joanna Noel. Man, I'm so sorry. Tell Blob I'm sorry. Says, any chance of a signed copy of your science fiction book? Obviously, we pay. The issue is just like shipping it around, because then I'd have to get copies and then sign. Let me see what happens. Yes, that's possible, but it's going to have to wait on me actually getting a fucking copy of the book. Several people now have gotten copies of it, and I haven't yet. I don't know what's going on, if they lost it or what, fucking assholes. But yeah, once I get a copy, my own copy of the books, then I will consider like buying a block of them and signing them, and I'll work something out. Maybe I'll do some sort of competition or contest or give them out. We'll have a raffle. We'll have a church raffle. Okay. St. Jean d'Arc says, shout out to the disavowed artist. Man, you got some skills. Yes, indeed, he does have skills. And it comes through even with his strange cartoons. I'm still trying to figure out what to do with his animations because they're insane. But there's a great deal of potential there. He's a very, very talented artist. Anyway, check him out. I mean, I'm not saying right now that there's a whole lot going on other than skeletons blowing the living shit out of people with clouds of blood spray. But, what he does well. Mr. Ixme says, familiarizing yourselves with UN's Agenda 21 and 2030 is recommended. I will do that. Spoonie G says, Semiagog, if I went to Turkey, how many days to see the main sites? Heard domestic airfare was cheap. Well, I'd be careful. And if you're female, I wouldn't go by yourself. If you're a male, I would. But if you're the kind of person that... Turkey's a great place. There are a lot of wonderful people there. There's also plenty of ways to get into trouble, and I think particularly so right now. That's not to say that you couldn't go and never see any of it, any bad things. You just have to be alert and aware. So I don't know if I'd give you recommendations until I knew more about what other places you had traveled and how much familiarity you have with, keeping yourself out of trouble in a foreign country. Lance Corporal Veteran, as an old viewer of the channel, he didn't put the @ sign at the beginning, but I'm going to try to take care of his comment too, because he's been watching for a long time. Semiagog, is BLM movement becoming the brand for a new non-theistic intersectional religion? Yeah, man, I tend to think it is, and if it isn't, I mean, they're taking advantage of an opportunity to do more begging and cringing and whining and snarling and demanding. So in that respect, I think quite a bit of it will go away as we get closer, or as we pass the election. But in one particular respect, I think we're seeing something come out that is very much the brand, if you will, for a new non-theistic intersectional religion. And that is this new ass rainbow flag that I just saw today. I had not seen it before. Somebody was throwing it around. It was somebody from the Sugar Butter crew. I can't remember who it was. But anyway, they've got a new rainbow flag now that's some new variation of it. It's kind of like, it looks like the South African flag if the triangle that's on the left of the South African flag was also on the right, so it kind of forms an X, but then there are all these different colors, so it looks like a rainbow flag mixed with the kind of cards you see propped up on makeup counters for like skin tones. It's really kind of horrifying, but it does seem to be a first attempt at the world flag of rainbow colors, but with a bunch of brown and black added in. I mean, it's shockingly ugly, but that, shouldn't necessarily surprise any of us. So yeah, to some extent, I think some of it, the short answer, some of it is going to go away as we get past the election, but some of it, like possibly that flag, I think will end up being with us, unfortunately, for a while. M. Barron says, Semiagog, how cool is that picture of the Mongolian with his AK and pet snow leopard? That was some fucking shit. The only thing that would have taken it the next, step was to have like, a golden eagle on his arm, Tell me, Conan, what is best in life? To crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of the women. Yes. All right. This apple juice is great. Manzikert 1071. What is this? Somebody's getting me? Fuck, I can't find it. Where is this? All right, I just lost myself. Where are we going, man? It's all gotten ahead of me. Okay, there we are. Somebody is calling me to task on Manzikert. I'm checking this right now. God damn it. $10.71. Okay, that's the wrong one. All right, let me check buy bars. and I can't bitch about that. Thank you for the correction. I did say I wasn't positive about the name of the battle. This is how I'm going to find out, and I will correct my error. Baibars, Mongols. There it is. All right. The Battle of Elbistan, April 15th, 1277. The Mamluk Sultan Baibars marched from Syria into the Mongol-dominated Seljuk Sultanate of Rum and attacked the Mongol occupation force in the Battle of Elbistan. Upon reaching Elbistan with at least 10,000 horsemen, Baibars made ready for battle with the Mongols, expecting them to be around 30,000. However, although the Mongol forces were smaller than the Mamluk army, there were Georgians and Rum Seljuks that bolstered their numbers. Baibars won. So, yes, mea maxima culpa. It was not the Battle of Manzikert, it was the Battle of Elbistan. My apologies. Battle of Manzikert is earlier, correct, 1071, and involved the Byzantines and some other fuckers. Who? Where am I? Who? Now I have to file it in my memory. Byzantines and Seljuks. Seljuk Türkler ya ne bileyim ben yani içki içiyorum benim hatam değil. Okay. Next question. James Roberts, would you be interested in talking to Jonathan Pohl again sometime? Your last stream with him was rather good, and I'd like to hear more on the subject with him. I like talking, I communicate all the time with Dr. Pohl on Twitter, and I like him. Not only is his education excellent, he's a friendly guy. He's helped me out with all kinds of leads on things. Just recently today, some stuff about Bolsheviks and study of the occult. But he also digs Robert E. Howard, Weird Tales, H.P. Lovecraft, and apparently even Dungeons and Dragons. Angel Loot. That's another battle. Fuck, Angel Loot. See, I got so much shit in my mind now. Muslim Mamluks and Mongols in southeastern Galilee. That's 1260. Okay. You know what? I probably was mixing this Elbistan and Angel Loot together. Monkey Khan. But who headed it up? It wasn't... What's his name at that point, was it? It wasn't Baibars. Anyway, I don't have time to read and learn about this and bore the shit out of y'all. Okay. So yes, my mistake. Elbistan. Okay, so yeah, I'm happy to talk to Dr. Pohl at any point when the subject fits, either on his channel or on my own. Happy to work it out with him as it's suitable. Okay, adherent of Lady Columbia, Semigog, I wanted to thank you and Tim for a lot of the philosophical and cultural content. You both and two others really helped me explore many ideas that I have implemented into improving my life. I am glad to hear it. It's good to know that I do something other than merely entertain myself, and thanks for sticking with the channel. I dig my old subscribers. Not angry about the new ones, but I dig the old ones who have been around for a long time, putting up with my shit. Okay, Jesse J, another long-time channel follower. Semigog, there is a thing called United Nations Agenda 21, and it's worth taking a look at. If you look up Rosa Koire, she has been interviewed recently by Computing Forever. Very well, I shall do it. I shall, sir. Thank you. Okay. BDB. Semigog. Feelings on turning LA, Chicago, and New York City into global city-states, which the U.S. military controls, like the Janissaries controlled Istanbul. I think that is their compromise. I don't know how that's all going to work out with the city-state thing. Maybe you go, I know the Propertarian crew is big on that, so maybe check with John Mark on his ideas for that. I'll be waiting to see how their Declaration of Reformation program in, what is it, Richmond, I think, how that goes on July 4th. We shall see whether or not John Mark can turn his just short of 100,000 follower, you know, how many of those from YouTube he can really turn out to boots on the ground, you know, declaration signing for the Propertarian cause. I was interested to see that they did manage to squeeze down Kurt Doolittle's ideas to a 2-page graphic. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with propertarianism that couldn't be fixed by them having figured out exactly what propertarianism is before having pitched it to the public. It's so much. I mean, I get that the big ideas, work in progress, etc. But he should have waited however many more years it took to get it all sorted out, so it's all there on paper. I mean, the number of different websites that have different text half written. Yeah, Kurt Doolittle's crazy as a fucking bedbug, which isn't saying anything. So am I. I'm not dismissing him, but yeah, I don't want to dog on him. He should have figured out exactly what propertarianism is and finished it, so that the public facing part of it that's presented for review was already done before he was trying to sell it to the public. It's a classic case of you should have, leave it in the oven a little longer before you pitch it to the world, in my view. Anyway. Nature Mark says, cigarette butts on the dash because my ashtray has keys in it. Alright. Boomer21 says, Semigog, are you familiar with any of the existing FEMA camps? No, I am not. That's a different world. I know a lot of people follow that kind of stuff. I don't as much, I'm sorry to say. John Gora, Semigog, thanks for all the love. You doing a collab with Dangerfield? He said you two had something in the works. No, but I'd be interested to talk to him because he's a smart guy. I mean, he's funny and he's smooth. So, his streams are fun to watch. But I didn't know much about him. But then I saw him, where was it? Maybe it was on Millennial Woes for Millennial, or maybe it was Guide to Culture or something. I can't remember. He talked to somebody, though, and I was surprised to learn that he was, I mean, I don't mean surprised, he didn't seem stupid, but he revealed that he was very well read on all kinds of theoretical shit. He's a smart guy. And he too, like I did, though more so in his case, he lived around the world in various places. I think it'd be interesting to talk to him about expats and things, but we will see. We haven't connected yet, but at some point I'm sure I'll talk to him. I mean, if he'll have it. All right, Arthur Mathers. Semigog, how much of an impact do you think phosphines, or symbols observed in a prisoner's cinema environment's sensory deprivation, have had on civilization? Phosphines. The fuck's a phosphine? Sounds like something I should wear rubber gloves for. Oh, good gracious, yes. That's actually a rather deep question. And it goes to, and I'm not trying to say that like, you don't know that your question is deep, but I'm going to tell you that it is. I don't mean it like that. I'm just like, okay, this is going to take some chewing through. Because in my experience, there's quite a bit going on with the way in which the brain assembles sense impressions. So you've got the idea of synesthesia, right? So you can smell a color or hear a smell, right? These ideas of synesthesia, as it's generally understood, suggests to me that there are ways in which the mind can take sense information and reshape it to communicate all sorts of things that people, let's say in a normal state of mind, would not imagine those standard sense impressions could communicate. So I don't know, but let's say, for example, you did some kind of hardcore psychedelic, and let's say, for example, that you were sitting down and meditating, and that what was three-dimensional suddenly became two-dimensional. And let's say that the things that were dark that were in front of you suddenly became three-dimensional again, but they seemed to recede, whereas the things that were bright seemed to be coming towards you. So your three-dimensionality dimensionality would resolve into a two-dimensionality that then became three-dimensional again, but in a very different way according to a different set of rules, and suddenly a whole new picture appears before you. These sorts of experiences, I think, have to do with the mind making the most of sensory input, and really just, it's like a Brian Geisen cut up or something. It's like I'm trying to think of the right terms for it. It's repurposing that sense data in ways that are entirely unexpected and even contraindicated within that sensory domain, like you get with synesthesia, where it's like, well, someone has perfect pitch, and when they do a C, ding, they can see the color green, right? In the same way, I think these phosphenes, which, that's one area that you can explore, but there's a whole other area where things seem to drift by in hypnagogia before sleep, where I'll see trailing streamers of things, and then in the midst of this fluttering, trailing streamer of the thing behind my eyes as I'm drifting asleep, suddenly it will whirl and come into sharp focus, and I'll see a face there, or a figure, or a movement, and then suddenly it drifts again, almost like leaving trails behind it. There are many ways that sense data can be repurposed, and so I would imagine that given all the centuries of millennia of human beings meditating, or stylites sitting on top of pillars, or people sitting in front of burning bushes, cannabis in some cases, gobbling mushrooms, or engaging in excitatory or inhibitory gnosis, that at some point phosphenes have played some role in some mystical or Gnostic experience. The issue becomes trying to put any kind of figure on that in terms of how important it is relative one thing to another. I probably talked about that for far longer than I should have. Okay, where are we now? Zed said, Dangerfield is safe, do proceed. Well, it's less about safe and more about interesting. And he does seem to be interesting. But thank you, Zed, for the input, as always. What's next? Sorry, just trying to get down through these comments. Looks like y'all are talking about a number of other things. Joanna Noel says, Semyagog, best wishes to Tim. His summer of discontent is here. It's beginning. It's beginning. But there's plenty more room for it to get worse. All right, what's next? Sorry guys, I'm a little bit behind here. Just scanning this. Adherent of Lady Columbia says, Semyagog sticks me to point about organic movements of right and left and corruption of groups via finance and political subversion in movements to perpetuate their continued existence. I haven't seen that. I will have to go and check it out. Adherent of Lady Columbia, Semyagog, i.e. the NRA, and never addressing the NFA or the original intent of the Indians. Yes, I would have to look into that. John Ski is in the house. Permits? We don't need no stinking permits. All right. Oh, I see it's a Tasmanian speaking with a person in the southern U.S. Yeah. All right. Where are we next? All right, questions, ladies and gentlemen. Where are we at? Now it's 10:25. You have 35 minutes left, peoples. If you wish to pick my brains for anything, and I don't blame you if you don't, now is the time. Semyagog from Arthur Mathers. Have you ever experienced sleep paralysis? And if so, could you describe one of those experiences? Yes, usually it involves a strange kind of hypnagogia, the typical thing of feeling like you've woken up and you haven't, and a sense of alarm that I want to get out of the dream. And I'm dreaming that I'm trying to wake up. So the dream is an analog of where I am, and I have the sense that I want to wake up, and yet I can't. But it's never a situation where I really am fully in the material world and I'm trying to wake up is always that I have a false wake up in the dream, and it's an analog of where I actually am. And I try to wake up and I realize that I can't. And I'm trying to get out of the situation. Sometimes it's prompted by something that you could call nightmarish, or some concern that I'm trying to get away, or a sense of urgency that I have to get to. So I have to wake up and I'm trying to do it and I can't. However, there is an overlap, because there'll be a thing where I'm like, I try to cry out or say something or wake up, and I can sort of hear myself, even though I'm in the dream state, I can hear myself in reality do something like go, you know, and I have to try to fight my way out of it. And I've never had it last very long. I've never become particularly alarmed about it, because I used to fool around with lucid dreaming and dream journals and all of that stuff when I was in high school. So I tend to carry more awareness into my dreams, I think, than, I won't say most, but than many people do. All right. John B says, Semigog, what languages can you speak? English. And I can kind of get away with Turkish. If I went back and lived in Turkey for a while, I would pick it up. Spoken Turkish, I could pick it up again. I mean, I had a good friend there one day tell me, it seems like you can almost speak Turkish. It was this day where he said it. But I've forgotten the majority of that, and I had just barely limped across the finish line. So I could speak conversational Turkish fairly well, with good comprehension, fairly quick, decent pronunciation. But as soon as it got complex, or whenever you start using like really specific terminology, like if they started talking about automotive parts or plants, you know, I got lost. So right now, Turkish and English, I can speak English and a little bit of Turkish. And, you know, I've learned bits of things here and there, a little bit of Latin, a little bit of Italian, a little bit of French, but, you know, nothing to speak of. Turkish I can actually speak a little bit, though. It's not like most Americans where they know 4 Spanish words and they're like, oh, I speak Spanish. So yes. Adherent of Lady Columbia says, Semigod, in Illinois, gun sales are up to a report of 500%. Yeah, I saw that article. And that's not the only place. I talked to a friend of mine who lives up in D.C., and he was just going to buy some new stuff. He got himself a, what's it called, a C-Camp 32. I'm like, forget about a C-Camp 32, man. Beretta Jetfire, man. Beretta Jetfire. Anyway, he went to go get it, and he, for whatever reason, he had to come back the next day because they didn't have something he was supposed to have. So the first day he was there, they were doing like COVID stuff, and so they would only let like 6 people in the place, and he'd come early in the morning, 6 in the place at a time. So he was in there doing some paperwork, and again, it didn't work out for him, so he had to leave and come back the next day. But that first day when he was there, he was leaving, and he said there were like 30, 40 people lined up outside the gun shop on the street, on the pavement, you know, out there waiting to get in a line, you know, socially distanced. And then he told me when he went back, you know, a day or two later, came out of the place at the end of his visit, and the same thing was going on. So apparently there are a lot of people buying guns. A lot of people buying guns. St. Jean d'Arc says, Semigog, most of us just aren't qualified to pick your big brain. Nonsense. I can make my big brain smaller with very little effort. All right. Next question. Permby didn't put at Semigog at the beginning of the question, but I happened to catch it. It says, do you think Turkey will become a full EU member? And if so, how do you think it will change Turkey? I do not think Turkey will become a full EU member. Certainly not for the foreseeable future. Not a fucking chance. Never. Guy from Vermont says women get a 20 gauge shotgun. Yeah, or get a 410. 410's quick and light. And you can still load it up with, I mean, you have fewer pellets or whatever of double out buck or whatever it is you choose, number 1, you know, whatever. You can do a 410 too. Nice and quick and light. All right. Prism says down here. Hello, Prism, by the way. Another old channel follower. Very glad to see you around, man. Down here in South Carolina, gun store shelves are skeletons. All you can find are a few boxes of exotic ammo. Even online, guns like Glocks are out of stock. Well, good. Good. Harry Henderson says the EU is going to collapse. I tend to agree with him on that, at least in its current form. Minoan says, Semi-Agog, have you ever put on that costume behind you and run around with a sword screaming invectives? No, I put it on for Halloween's, but it's really old and the shit on it is original, so I don't run around. And I'm always trying to be busy not to spill a drink on myself, and I never shout invectives. I'm too old to shout invectives these days. I just do it online, and y'all have to put up with it. Boomer21, Semi-Agog, last question. Are you familiar with the fact that the 42,000 5G satellites which surround the globe like a fishing net around a soccer ball will be up and running as of January 2021? I am not. I am not. I will have to take a look. I mean, Mr. Ixme told me I had to do it, so, you know, I'll probably do it. When she tells me I have to do shit, I'll go look. She's an old friend. I trust her. If she says check it out. Not that I don't, you know, take into account what you're saying, but if an old friend tells me to go look at it, that's worthwhile. I'll definitely check it out. Inanna Vega in the house, another channel follower from way back in the day. Glad to see you here. Hello, Miss Lady. Harry Henderson, Semi-Agog, what are your thumps? What are your thoughts on Trump 2020? He better not have a skeletal Trump rally like he did again. He can survive that one, but I don't know if he could survive many more of those. He's going to have to get his shit together. I tend to think that there will be some black swan something in combination with the other shoe dropping on any number of these things, like, you know, Comey and Brennan and FISA warrants and Susan Rice and Samantha Power and Roger Stone. You know, God knows, maybe something like Seth Rich. I don't know. We'll see. But I believe that some of the things that we have been waiting for, we are going to see. And I believe that things that are entirely unexpected will happen between now and November, and it won't just be an October surprise. All right, we're fireworks outside. Strange. We get gunshots too, but I just had fireworks. Fireworks in all these cities. Thousands and thousands of fireworks going off. People out in the street firing off fireworks and setting people on fire, making noise and making a nuisance of themselves. Almost makes one wonder what country manufactures huge numbers of fireworks and is the single largest exporter to the United States of fireworks. It just, I don't know. It makes me want to ask that question. Okay. Next, Patty Burns, Semi-Agog, you may as well get a 28 bore instead of a 410. Light and same recoil as a 410, but you get more shot in the cartridges. Yes, but if there's anything that's even harder to find than 410 shells, it's probably 28. Or 16 gauge too is another one that's, you know, a pain in the butt. So, Cake Dispenser says, Semi-Agog, do you play Warhammer? I do not. I used that Skaven pick because I went to look for something about diseased priests, or what was I looking for? I did a Google image search for something having to do with like diseased priests or something like that, and the Skaven came up, and I reviewed it very quickly, and I was like, wow, that just fits perfectly. But no, I don't play Warhammer. Arthur Mathers says, Semi-Agog, have you listened to any Jonathan Bowden speeches? I have not. I'm sorry to say. John Ski says, I'm surprised that made it through the... Oh, he's talking about something different. I thought he was saying he was surprised that this made it through the Atlanta postal system. Yeah, next time I go to my P.O. box, I may be fucking, like, beaten to death because John Gore is sending that to me, man. I'm like, next time, put it in a fucking envelope, dude. The people at the post office, man. Yeah, I'm lucky I didn't hear about it at the time. As you can imagine, they're a melanin-rich group of people. All right. Mr. Ixme says, how's the general vibe in your region with police? I'm just not seeing that many police here that are for the city. They're still here, and you know, you hear sirens at night and the rest. But I think, to be honest with you, that the State Patrol has taken up a lot of slack because I'm seeing them off on side streets in the city. And normally you just see them at certain times on the expressway, you know, pulling people over for speeding. So it's still a mess here, certainly. Um, and I think that the blue flu is very real here. But yeah, uh, it hasn't gone totally crazy yet, but I think it's screwed up, and it may well get worse, and that a lot of the slack is being taken up by the State Patrol. Arthur Mathers says Trump just wants his 4 years. He doesn't care. I don't think so. I'm betting on his ego. He did not come into this to be a 4-year president. He came into this to leave a legacy. He's accomplished all these other things in his life. He wants to be remembered by history. So yeah, I don't think it's just his 4 years. All right. Permby, semi-gog fireworks are a favorite of rioters in other parts of the world. I guess so. That too would make me consider where they come from. John Ski says, Semigog, what do you think behind it? What do you think is behind this societal transformation? Just Soros or an entire cabal secret society? I do not think it's just Soros. Absolutely not. There are various species of kami with their Varangian guards, that being a certain proportion of certain ethnic groups that are drawn most heavily to communism as a kind of new religion. There are Chinese, there's Soros, there's blue commies in the EU, there's all kinds of people. There's Venezuelans and Iranians and North Koreans and others who have a lot to lose, who are throwing in on all of this. So I don't know, but in terms of secret societies, you're just going to have to wait, because I'm doing the next discussion with Anteos, the German guy that I started talking about secret societies with, and there's a lot. We're coming across a lot of interesting, funky stuff. So yeah, on cabals and secret societies, I would have been more dismissive in the past, but the more I dig into it, in discussion with Anteos, the less inclined I am to dismiss all of it out of hand. All right. What's going on here? I'm looking for questions. Dennis Helge's in the house. From the frosty, icy north parts of Iceland. Hardfisker, man. God, I wish I could get Hardfisker here. Hardfisker with butter. Oh, yeah, that shit is good. Ladies and gentlemen, imagine like a super tough, chewy, like beef jerky, but it's made of dried fish. Super dried, super tough, but then you spread butter on it. Oh, it's so goddamn good, man. And I can't buy it here. A guy from Vermont says, Elric versus Conan. Oh, man. Blood and souls for my Lord Ariak. Absolutely. Pedro Jesus says, Semigog, what degrees do you have? I have no degrees. I dropped out of high school and got a GED. And then I went to college for like 2 weeks, and I was like, fuck that shit. Fuck. I mean, I hated it. Words cannot describe how offended I was by all of it. Really, really hated it. All right. What am I missing here? Something about the book of Exodus. Mr. Ixmi's talking about cabals. Delta 3 actual. Semigog, why do you think the globalists have lifted the veil on the goals of their project right now, at least as it applies to the indigenous peoples of Europe and their diaspora? I think there are two things going on with that. I think one, they didn't intend to. They had a premature detonation on their bomb. Or you could say somebody walked over and forced them to have to turn up the dial on their frog boiling pot, right? You saw it with, you remember how Hosni Mubarak was in Egypt, and Egypt was under the boot of Mubarak, and it was really tightly locked down. The problem is that Mubarak was in his 80s and was going to die, which meant that there was going to be a whole bunch of upheaval in Egypt. And remember, Egypt under Nasser went after Israel and shit. Egypt has a huge population, a really big army. I'm not saying they're like the richest country in the world, but they have a huge population. And so that would be a big problem for Israel. It would be a big problem for all sorts of people who want to, who have plans for the Middle East. But in particular, it would be a big problem for Israel. And so I believe that people who wanted to remake the Middle East did a premature detonation. Instead of waiting for Hosni Mubarak to go out, they kicked off the so-called grassroots, spontaneous Arab Spring. And basically they prematurely detonated, or I should say controlled detonation, right? You know the bomb's there, you can't get rid of it, but what you're going to do is you're going to set it off early with knowledge that about what's going to happen, and you do it in a way that's more controlled. Even so, they had to deal with problems with the Muslim Brotherhood, but then they put Sisi into place and kind of controlled it. I think there's something similar going on with what happened here in terms of boiling the frog and the rest. Hillary Clinton was supposed to come into office. She was supposed to be the next person who was in control of the country, and everybody was planning on it. Nobody expected Trump to win. Nobody expected Trump to win, and this would be a very, very different. I mean, for all that you want to bitch about Trump, and there's plenty to bitch about Trump regarding, if Clinton had gotten in, God fucking help us. And so what happened is once Trump came in, it forced everyone to have to review their plans and to do some things in a more hurried way than they had hoped to. I think just straight out, it caused other people to panic and to do stupid things, which is very often what happens when people panic or when they rush. So, yeah, I think that's part of why it happened very quickly. Part of it is that they, Trump did a controlled detonation on them, forcing them to have to do things before they were quite ready to, or forcing them to have to do it in ways that they hadn't originally expected to have to do it, which, sets it maybe just, 2 clicks off from where they thought it was, but that creates gaps, that creates opportunities, that creates new variables that the sharp pencils have not worked through. And so it creates a cascading, at least potentially a cascading series of fuck-ups. Prism, Semigog, what do you think the prospect of a massive election scandal for 2020 being a trigger for some kind of hot conflict in the U.S.? I think it's possible, but it would be short-term and it would be certain cities. I am hoping it is not going to come to that, because that's a fucking mess. Dennis Helge says wolffish is best. I'm going to have to look into that. If you remember Dennis Helge, can you write whatever the Icelandic word is for wolffish down there, so I can look it up? Because I want to find the fish jerky, man. Hardfisker. It's so fucking good. There are people saying sounds awful. That shit is not awful. It is good. Flower Tower says, Semigog ever visited ancient forests in Europe? No. I don't know that there are many places where they still stand. Probably in Eastern Europe there are a lot of them, or if you get up into the north. The only time I really got out into the woods was I went wandering outside a castle with my girlfriend at the time in Germany, and I think we were near Nuremberg and Lauf an der Pegnitz or something, if I'm remembering that correctly. And so I got out into some forests, but they, in Germany you think you're in the wilds and then you discover no, you're not. But I liked the trees, I liked the hardwoods, lots of deciduous trees and the rest. But no, I can't. Where do you find a deep old forest like that in Europe? Do you go to Russia? You go to maybe Poland? I don't know. I haven't seen any like that, but I like the vibe of it. I can tell that it's the archetype for the forests. But my people have been in the New World for long enough that the East Coast Appalachian forests are mine. That's what I'm used to. That's what I come from. I don't want to move away from it. My friends are all now telling me, man, we got to look for places where we can go, or the environment's a little better. You're not going to have to screw with Stacey Abrams being a governor. And they're talking about places like Oklahoma and the rest. And I'm like, man, maybe Missouri. Oklahoma's too damn far away. Like, I need to be near the Appalachian Mountains, or it just feels wrong. Okay. A guy from Vermont says Elric versus Conan is more like Stormbringer versus Conan. Yeah, unless Elric summons Meerclaw, Lord of Cats, or gets involved in some sort of eldritch sorcery and his drugs. All right. Dogbert says, Semigog, do you know the works of Michael Tsarion? Lots of info on cults and alternative history. No, I do not. Michael Tsarion. I'll have a look. Thank you. John Ski says, Semigog, if you could bring Thucydides forward in time to our present day and show him our current state of affairs, what do you think he would opine? He would probably just fucking laugh. I don't even want to imagine what anybody from back from some time before modern dentistry would think of what crybabies we are now. I mean, myself foremost among the crybabies. It's just, there's so much that we bitch and cry about that we're like weaklings in some respects compared to people in the past. Or I am, anyway. Let's see here. Whoa! See, I scroll down and it refreshes and makes me lose where I am. Okay, ancient force in Europe, Michael Tsarion, Thucydides. Now, Dennis Helge, Semigog, there's a large Icelandic diaspora in the upper Midwestern region of America. I'm sorry. Yow! There was I have an Icelandic guy who used to be friends with me. He's very liberal and shit, and I think he hates me now because I'm a Nazi or something. But yeah. Jäger svå vitlaus. Yeah, he taught me to speak. He taught me to say some things in Icelandic. And I even had a little Icelandic girly friend once upon a time who came to visit me from there. I can't say these people's names because Iceland is so fucking small that you probably know them or their families. But yeah, I've known a few Icelandic people, and some of them even came south. And that's how I found out about Hardfisker. Let's see, what else? Maitre Mark, Semigog, did you see the India versus China battle with hand weapons? Killed each other with spike clubs and iron bars. Yeah, I tweeted about that. I'm like, those motherfuckers, man. You know how easy it is. They could turn out, I mean, especially with their slave labor in their Chinese factories or the slave labor in the Indian factories. They could have totally put together some lightweight, high-quality body armor. You know, some people on Twitter were telling me that they should use, you know, pole arms and the rest. And I'm like, there's no room for pole arms with these small open areas, you know, Galwan Gorge or Valley or whatever. I said, give them, you know, tomahawks, the equivalent of like light hand axes, maybe maces, but not with all the spikes and everything, a proper light mace. That's the thing. People don't understand these days how light war axes historically were, how light maces were, and how important things like short swords are when you don't have a whole lot of room to move around and you might be mobbed by a group. You can't do much with a long sword. So, yeah, they should have like the equivalent of short swords, Roman gladiuses, short swords, armor, shields. They should have both just rolled up in there in their armor. And, I mean, shit. At that point, you could do the whole, like, Hunger Games drones thing, filming it. And, I mean, you could sell that shit on HBO. I'd watch, definitely. Major Mark, Semigog, did you... Oh, that's the Semigog thing about hand weapons. I already answered that. Shit fire. We have 10 minutes left. 10 minutes left. Did you scream Varus, give me back my wages? Mobo. Howdy. Białowieża. Białowieża. I don't know how to pronounce that. Forest in Poland. Last primeval forest in Europe. Okay, so I was right. Poland, somewhere in Eastern Europe and in the north, likely. Alright. Whoa, shit, it just refreshed. God damn it. Tazi Michelle says the only degree you need is from the School of Hard Knocks. I've been to that school, let me tell you. I mean, there are other people who went to that school who had it harder than I did. But I've had a few hard knocks in my life. Just a few. It could be worse, though. It could be worse. So I ain't bitching. God, man, I'm so far behind. Louis the 17th. Semigog, did you know Gomez Adams was married to Helen Keller and their son was a Goonie who later became a Hobbit? See, and I fucking bothered to stop and read that. Fucking hell. Semigog, how do you feel about Surströmming? Surströmming. I don't know what that. My German is limited to like having briefly had a German girlfriend, so I Schlafmütze, and you know, aua. Haben Sie vorher? I don't know what Surströmming is. Sabrina C1, or however the hell you say that, speaks several languages and has raised many children who speak many languages as well. Credit to her. So yeah, I don't know what that word means, I'm sorry to say. Maitre Mark, they fought with improvised hand weapons because they were not issued with guns yet. Yeah, there's apparently something about how they'd be in violation of some important agreement if they, discharged, proper weapons in that area. But doesn't matter, man. They should have been issued with not guns, but body armor and helmets and shields and swords. It would be awesome. Think about selling the rights to that, to watch it on TV. What? John Ski says, Semigog, did you see the pic of Nancy Pelosi wearing a lapel pin in the fashion of a fascistic fashion of a bundle of sticks and the axe head? No, I did not see it. Wow. Somebody says, Boomer21 says, gladius, sword in Latin. Yes, but I'm looking for gladi. How the hell do you say it in the plural? Alright. Whoa, I'm lost. Semigog, it's Swedish for stinky fish. Okay. Alright, I'm going to look this up right now. Just so I don't forget it later. Good stinky fish. All kinds of tasty things. I'm going to replace phosphenes with Surströmming. Sour herring. Oh, it's in a sauce. These fucking Baltic peoples with their, like, eels. I remember reading Günter Grass Tindrum talking about throwing a horse's head in the water and pulling it up, fishing for eels. Eels are good, though. You know what I don't understand is how the German eat them damn Karpfen or whatever. Like, I'm used to, like, greasy catfish and shit, but I went to this fish restaurant. My German girlfriend and her family took me to this place to have carp. I was like, I mean, it was all right. It was all right. It wasn't bad, but fucking carp, man. And fish in sauce. See, what I like about the Hardefisker is that it's dry. That's why you have to put butter on it, or you're like, it's like when you chew up a carrot and you've been chewing it for too long. Maybe other people don't have this problem, but if I'm chewing a carrot for a long time, like, I can't stop chewing it and I can't swallow it. Like, I have to keep chewing it. I can't. Same thing with Hardefisker without butter. It's probably too much information. I apologize. John B. Semigog feasts on fermented shark fin. I'll try it. St. Jean d'Arc says, Semigog, how did you meet Tim? How long have you known him? And how is that mountain man so well read? I don't know how he's so well read. And for all that he continues to do shit after having had 2 strokes, and it's only made him more calm and polite. He's always been formidable, and I've never understand how much he reads as much as he does. You can honestly say that he's read so much shit that he really does forget half of it, and he's still read more than, yeah. Anyway, I met him when I was 19, and we only have 4 minutes left, so I don't want to go into that full story. I've explained it elsewhere, if I remember correctly. Semiagog, are you familiar with Tolkien's condemned theory that some languages are inherently superior to others in vocabulary, structure, and actual sounds that are made? No, but I do like how he apparently took Turkish as a model for Orcish, which explains why orc sounds like Turk. So yeah, I'm not familiar with that though. I'd have to take a look. Arthur Mathers, Semigod, can present-day European paganism overcome the LARP stereotype? The best of the pagans are the most quiet about it, and I've known some who were interesting and pretty deep people, but there's a whole lot of truth. There's a whole lot of truth to the LARP stereotype. It's why it's become a stereotype, even for those who claim and insist most vociferously, most sincerely that they're not LARPing. Those are very often people who are LARPing the most, mainly because you can't go backwards, you have to go forwards. But again, that's not all of them. I've known some European pagans, neo-pagans, depending on what they called themselves, that were very interesting people, very well-read, very knowledgeable, who had paid their dues, and in addition to being well-read, they had stolen for themselves some portion of wisdom, and some of them were even willing to share it. Okay. La Keva says, Semigog, you know how to cook carp? 415 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 minutes on a board with olive oil. When it's done, take it out and throw away the fish and eat the board. I walked right into that. I can't say shit because, like catfish, you can say there's this awful thing if you fry it right. If you it's fucking funny. Catfish can be good, and I'd be willing to believe that carp can be pretty good, but damn. It was pretty fucking greasy. Does Tim play any musical instruments? No, but he whistles. He's very into whistling, and he does quite well with it, actually. I mean, he's got good pitch, which I don't. Okay, Minoan says smoked carp is awesome. Yeah, if you dry it out, if you smoke it at length, that could be good. All right. I am now coming up. It's 10:59. I've already published my book of poems. If you want my damn book of poems, Cinders from the Bloomery of Youth by Oliver Timken Parra, available on Amazon. Or if you want my science fiction books, Vinculum, you can find them on Amazon. But I am not going to go into one of my own poems. I am instead going to read you in closing a Robinson Jeffers poem called To a Young Artist. And then I will bid you all good night. So thank you very much for joining me this evening. Thanks for putting up with my long-winded whatnot. Thank you to the new channel followers checking out the content. Thank you very much to the old crew, the OGs from Semiagog. I appreciate it very much. And now I will read this final poem, and then I will bid you all a very good night. Let me just get this sorted out so that I am ready to roll. Let me break this out to a separate window here. And it seems that this will run past. I like to have it end neatly at exactly this. Oh, 5 minutes late, actually. I'm good. I'm good. Because I started 5 minutes late. If I go 5 minutes over, it will be an even 2 hours. And that obsessive, compulsive aspect of my personality will be satisfied. Let me just get the live stream up here. I have it. Here is my closing poem. Let me get it lined up. This is by a poet named Robinson Jeffers. And he's an old-fashioned American. Not the oldest fashioned American. He's 20th century. But he went out and lived on the West Coast before the West Coast began to suck. And the most wonderful thing about him is that he had a wife he fell very in love with, and he found a plot of land on the Pacific looking out over the sea. I think this is a very, very fine thing about him. And he built a tower for her. He brought a guy in, apparently a mason, who helped him with, he worked with the mason to build a home out of stone, laying the stone and the mortar and all the rest. And while doing so, he learned from the mason how to do it. And then for his wife, he built her a stone tower that she could climb to the top of and look out across the Pacific in. That seemed to me a very fine thing. Now, this is a poem by him called To a Young Artist. Here we are. To a Young Artist by Robinson Jeffers. It is good for strength not to be merciful to its own weakness. Good for the deep urn to run over. Good to explore the peaks and the deeps, who can endure it. Good to be hurt, who can be healed afterward. But you that have whetted consciousness too bitter an edge, too keenly daring, so that the color of a leaf can make you tremble, and your own thoughts, like harriers, tear the live mind, were your bones mountains, your blood rivers to endure it, and all that labor of discipline labors to death. Delight is exquisite. Pain is more present. You have sold the armor. You have bought shining with burning. One should be stronger than strength. To fight bear sark in the stabbing field, in the rage of the stars. I tell you, unconsciousness is the treasure, the tower, the fortress. Referred to that, one may live anything. The temple and the tower. Poor dancer on the flints and shards of the temple porches. Turn home.